All right, before we do any more, let's do a little cleanup again here in the outliner. Looks like we've got some things that we can create a few collections for. So let's select the tires and let's just press the M key, create a new collection, and we'll call this tires. And so there we have those. Now these other things, the fenders, we should probably put these in a collection as well. So I'll select all of those, press M, new collection, call it fenders. And now we've got those. All right, that's looking a little bit better. Let's bring back the chassis, the gas tank, the seat. And yeah, so I thought maybe the next object we should create is this headlight. It's kind of a fairly prominent object on the motorcycle here. So let's work on that. Now, if I hit the 3 key and let's go to the side view here and take a look at it. So this is going to be kind of interesting because you would think it would be fairly easy. However, one might be tempted to just bring out a sphere, a UV sphere, and put it in here and cut it in half and it'd be fine. And that would be okay, but let me show you a problem with that. Let me press Shift A, Mesh, UV sphere, and I'm going to scale this down. And let's press RX90 to turn it. Now let me hit G and bring it up here. I'll hit the period key to zoom in. And if we go to wireframe, let me just show you something here. I'm going to get rid of half of this, delete this, and delete faces. Now if we scale down, right, to about here, and then we press S and Y and scale out a bit, you can see we're beginning to get that shape. However, let me show you something. As we try and smooth this, well, let's say we want to add a subdivision surface modifier to this to get it really smooth. So it doesn't have any of that kind of blockiness with the polygons. So we can come over here and add modifier subdivision surface. We can maybe turn it up to 2 to get it really smooth. And then look what happens. Can you see that pulling that's happening around that single point? See that? It gets a little bit messy back there, right? You can kind of see that right there. And there are different ways to try and avoid that. You could come in here and choose every other edge and dissolve those edges, but that still doesn't really solve the problem. There's still that single point there that's going to cause pulling around there. So to avoid that, there's another way. Let me hit delete and delete that. What we can actually do is begin with a cube. And I know that sounds strange, but let me show you what I mean. I'm going to press Shift A, Mesh Cube, and then I will hit the S key and scale in. Let's hit the G key and move this up here. And now what I'm going to do is add a subdivision surface modifier to this. So I'll add that, turn it up to 2, let's say. I'll right-click and shade smooth. And believe it or not, we're beginning to get something that we want here. Now, what I'm going to do is cut it in half. I'll press Control R and then add an edge loop right down the center. I'll press the 3 key and let me go to wireframe so we can see this. And I'll delete these faces here on the front. Delete and delete faces. And now what we can do is select this face here. Let me go ahead and turn on the cage. And we can scale that down until we get that point or that curved point that we see here. So let me just move this back. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just getting this point right here so there is no point in the center to cause that pulling. And then from this, we can extrude this forward. So if I take this edge and move it back a bit, and maybe this face and scale it down a bit. So something maybe kind of like this, let's say. Now, before we do anything else, a problem we're going to have is that this isn't exactly a circle. If we go to the front view, you can see it's kind of squared off, and that's because it began as a cube. So we're going to have to deal with that. But I think what we can do is maybe move this back a bit, scale this down some, and then bring this down a little bit more like this. And that is really what we want for the back of that headlight. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply this subdivision surface modifier and then extrude the rest out. So if I go into wireframe, you can see that that's what it looks like when we have the optimal display on. But if we turn this off, there's what we get. So if we applied the subdivision surface modifier, those are the polygons that we're going to get. Now we can turn this down a bit, but I don't think that's quite enough. So what let's do is let's turn this up to 2. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply the subdivision surface modifier here. Now, if we go back to solid view and tab into edit mode, you can see this is what we have now. So let's go back to here. I'm going to select this edge and I'm going to begin extruding this forward. But before I do, we probably need to get these into circles, right? So we can take one of these and we can create a circle out of this, a more exact circle. And to do that, we're going to need to add or enable an add-on. So let's come over to Edit and Preferences, and then under Add-ons, let's search for Loop, L-O-O-P. And here we have an add-on called Loop Tools, and we can just enable it by putting a check mark here. Now let's close this, and let's hit the N key to bring up this side panel, and now we have this extra tab here called Edit. And if we click on this, here's our Loop Tools. Now with this selected, I'm going to spin down the little circle one here. We can just click circle. And did you see it change more into a circle there? Let me do the next one here. I'll click here and you can see it changes to a circle when we do that. I'll click here and circle. And now we can begin extruding these out to create the headlight. So I'm going to go to the side view again. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this straight forward, and I'm going to scale this out to be about the right size. Let's say about like this. This headlight is tilted down just a bit, but I want to create this on the global axes here. So we're a little bit off, but we can still do this. I'm going to scale this up just a bit like this. And then maybe I'll take this one and I'm going to move it forward, hit the S key and scale out a bit, about like this. And then maybe this one I'll pull out like this and scale out like this. And then we can begin to see if we need any others in here. And I think we do. I think we need one right in here. So I'm going to scale that out. And maybe pull it back just a bit like this. And maybe I could even scale this one out just a little bit like this. All right, let's take a look at this. Yeah, so I think we're getting there. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and add that subdivision surface modifier again here, and we get that nice smooth shape without the pulling around that single point at the back. So I think I'm going to grab these edges and scale them out a little more. I'll turn on the cage right here, and let's see what we can do with this. We get a little bit more of a rounded shape. There we go. Now let's get this front part, and what I'm going to do is turn off the real-time view in the viewport here. I'm just going to turn that off so we go back to as if the subdivision surface modifier is not there. I'm going to hit E and S and scale out just a bit. And I'll hit E and Y and pull forward just a bit like this. And then I will scale in. I'll hit ES, bring this in a bit. And then EY, pull back just a bit, and then scale in a hair. Okay. Now let's go ahead and turn that subdivision surface modifier back on. Now we're going to need to add an edge loop to kind of tighten this edge up. So I'll press Control R, and let's move this in just a bit like this. And then maybe I'll add 2 edge loops here, scrolling the mouse wheel and hitting the Enter key twice. And then I'm going to scale these out in the X and the Z, but not the Y. I don't want to scale it out in the Y. So what we can do is press the Shift key to turn off the Y axis. I'm going to press S, Shift Y. Now it's only scaling in the X and the Z. I'm going to bring that out just a bit just to get a little bit more of a curve there. Maybe I'll add an edge right up here. Let's try that. So now let's get the lens. What I'll do is I'll tab into edit mode and alt click this edge. And now at this center point, I'm going to move the cursor to it. Shift S2 to move the cursor to that point. Now let's go ahead and use that sphere, because that headlight lens is going to be more flat. It isn't going to be as pointed as this part here. So I don't think we're going to get any polling per se when we use a sphere. So I'm going to press Shift A, Mesh, UV Sphere. I will scale it down quite a bit. Let's turn it, RX90. And then I'll tab into edit mode. Let's hit the Z key, go to wireframe, go to face mode with the 3 key, and then let's just delete half of it. Delete faces. And now if we tab back into object mode, what we can do is scale in. So it's inside here like this. Maybe I'll move it out just a little bit. And then let's scale in the Y, SY, and that'll just flatten that up like that. Let's try that. Z and solid. Yeah, maybe I'll scale it in just a bit, like that. And then let's smooth it. And there we go. And we've got our headlight.